Welcome to the Frog Factor podcast. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Mike Gundy has been fired at Oklahoma State. He got fired around lunchtime on Tuesday. I was actually doing a hit on a radio show that same day, and the host asked me if I thought Mike would get fired. We were talking about TCU and Big 12 football. And I said no at the time because I'm super smart. But the reason I said no is because I felt like since they publicly negotiated, if you don't remember, at the end of last season, right after the season wrapped up, Oklahoma State appeared to be on the way to firing Mike Gundy. And they essentially got in a room and hammered out a new contract, and he took a pay reduction. They had some other contingencies, I'm sure. Bottom line is they got some sort of deal done that allowed him to be the head coach. And my thought process was, if you had this almost breakup, first of all, you probably should have gone ahead and ripped the Band-Aid off right then and there. But since you decided not to, I thought they were almost stuck with him for the rest of the season, just simply because they almost let him go at the end of the year, and it would be weird to immediately backtrack that. But they lost to Tulsa last week, and so they decided to let him go. Why does this matter for TCU football? Well, the first thought that I had when I saw that Mike was let go, aside from legendary coach getting fired early in the season, was a question that Mando Frog, who I don't know the person's real name, I'm sorry, but that's what they go by on Twitter, reached out to me a few weeks ago and was like, hey, do you think if Gundy gets fired, TCU would have any sort of interest in a reunion with Hos Haney? And I didn't even really give it much thought at the time because I was like, well, a lot of things would have to happen. Mike Gundy getting fired. Josh Hoover would most likely have to leave for Hauss to consider coming here. Because the reason that Hauss left, if we're really getting down to it, when he committed while he was at Alito, he thought, okay, Max Duggan's the guy. He's leaving. Chandler Morris takes over. I get there. I'll be the dude. And even probably going into his freshman year, I feel like he evaluated the situation and said, all right, Josh Hoover is going to get a chance to start because he ended the year last season. Maybe he gets the ball for one season and is sort of a placeholder for me. That didn't happen, right? Josh Hoover showed in 2024 that he was the future at the quarterback position for TCU, at least for the next year. And Hauss wanted a chance to start. So we got an opportunity to go to Oklahoma State, and he decided to make it happen there. He won that job. Unfortunately for him, he got injured in the season opener, and he's probably not going to play for the rest of the season. I think even if he was ahead of schedule with the stress fracture in his foot, he would evaluate and say, you know what, there's not a lot for me to gain by playing right now. I should just wait the season out and then decide if I'm going to come back or I'm going to transfer. Now that Mike Gundy has been fired, there is a 30-day window where Oklahoma State players can enter the transfer portal. Important distinction, they are not eligible to play for another team this year. So if somebody ended up at TCU from Oklahoma State next week, they would have to redshirt, go through the rest of the season, and then they would be eligible to play next season. But if anyone hit the portal right now, even if they played a lot of snaps, they would have played a max of 3 games. So that red shirt year would be available for them if they wanted to take advantage of it. And I did have a thought of like, man, this just happened. Does TCU pick up the phone and at least give Hauss a call and say, hey, man, would you want a chance to come compete with Adam Schobel for the starting job next year? Now, I have 2 answers to that question. I don't think TCU would do that. If they did, I don't even really know if Hauss would be interested. I feel like the only way this would really work, and I'm not saying this would happen, I'm just saying this is the only scenario where I would see everything coming together and coming into focus, is if we knew for a fact that Josh Hoover is going to the NFL, which we don't know that right now. I saw Steven Johnson from the Footwear Star Telegram say that on X today that there were a number of pro scouts at TCU's practice on Tuesday, as there usually are. And he said the players, let me pull it up so I'll make sure I'm quoting him right. But he said the players that they were looking at or were giving the most focus to Eric McAllister, Bud Clark, Namdio Bizor, Manjack, Joseph Manjack, Caleb Alarmzor. He also said, I think there's going to be some early scouting of Josh Hoover. And someone asked him to clarify, what does that mean? Early scouting. He said, coming into the season, I think most scouts thought he would return for another year, and you start digging more into his film next year. Still may be the case, but I imagine he's getting more attention with QB struggling. I hope this makes sense. So basically, he feels like going into the season, most NFL scouts probably looked at Josh Hoover and said, that's a dude that we'll evaluate next year. I mean, it's fine to start evaluating him now to see what he can do, to sort of scout him and get a feel for his strengths and weaknesses. But we're not really going to dig into intangibles, all his abilities, some of the deeper level stuff until next season. Now, I agree. I think things have changed somewhat because he's playing well. And this will be basically his third year as a starter. I know with NIL, you can make more money than even a rookie contract in the NFL. Josh Hoover's making good money at TCU right now. I also know that most elite athletes have a lot more confidence in themselves than we do as fans. Meaning, we might look at a player's projection at the next level and think, oh, yeah, that guy's a good college player, probably not much of a pro. He'll get an opportunity, but I don't think he's going to be a great pro football player. That athlete in their mind is like, I'm going to be a great pro football player. And I'm sure Josh has a ton of confidence in himself, as he should, because honestly, when he was coming out of high school and getting ready for college, he was a 3-star recruit. His only power offer was to Indiana. He bet on himself. I think a lot of these guys, they bet on themselves when the opportunity comes. But if we found out in the middle of the season, you know what? I think Josh is bound for the NFL. Then I think it would make sense for Hauss to consider coming back. Or if he had any interest, which I don't think he would, but if he had any interest in being more of a gadget player, having some sort of special package for him, or he's primarily a running quarterback, then I think there would be some mutual interest there. But short of those things happening, I don't really see it being a possibility. It is an interesting subplot, though, because the coaching staff had a front row seat to his development and just who he is as a player when they evaluated him coming out of high school. My friend Tommy Fisher said they wouldn't give him an opportunity because in that freshman year, he didn't throw a single pass. And in his mind, that means the coaching staff has doubts about him as a passer, as someone who can throw the ball and make plays in that part of the offense. They feel like he is just an athletic guy who is primarily going to be a running threat. It's really difficult to say who this guy's going to be and what he's going to do because at this point in time, he's had one college start, which he didn't make it all the way through, and a handful of snaps at TCU, whereas Tommy laid out, he was just a wildcat quarterback who ran the ball, right? So there's all these things flying around that situation. But I don't feel like TCU would make a move for Hos Haney. And honestly, man, I didn't do a deep dive. I'm sure there's some young players on that Oklahoma State roster who maybe don't have many snaps yet that teams around the country will look at and say, yeah, let's give this guy a chance. Or, oh, yeah, we recruited this kid. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school. We really liked his tape. He ended up at Oklahoma State. Coach is fired. Now he's available. Let's go get him. But when you look at the stats for this team and who they have on the roster, I mean, not to be disparaging, but it makes sense why they weren't having a lot of success. And Mike Gundy is on the way out. Their leading receiver is Terrell Davis with 115 yards receiving. Christian Fitzpatrick has 84 yards receiving. Rodney Fields, their redshirt freshman running back, 143 yards rushing. That's a dude that I would be interested in because in a small sample size, he's done some good things. He's still very early in his career. But I think you also have to understand, like, what does TCU value in the portal? And I think these ideas and where they place their resources, it can shift and change and evolve depending on what type of team you have, what your personnel looks like. But at least in this Josh Hoover world that they're operating in right now, and I use him as the example because he's a quarterback, they don't have a big interest in breaking the bank for running backs. And I don't even know if Fields is going to be a guy that commands a lot. But I think anytime, it's simple supply and demand, right? You're at a point in time where there's not many people available. So if he becomes available, well, suddenly he's priority number one for certain schools. I don't feel like they go that route. There's some defensive linemen, Demarion Thomas being the main one, 6'2", 330 pounds. He's from Tulsa originally. He started his career at Vandy, ends up at Oklahoma State. He's having a nice season so far. He's a junior. I don't think you can ever have too many defensive linemen, especially on the interior. But he doesn't really fit. I'm not saying they wouldn't be intrigued by him. He doesn't really fit the prototypical defensive lineman that Andy Avalos and his staff pursue. I mean, he is a big nose guard run stuffer, and they've sort of gotten away with that now that they run more 4 and 5 man fronts, depending on where they put the stud linebacker and where they're bringing pressure from and things of that nature. So I don't feel like, I imagine TCU has a list of a few guys on that roster that they're like, okay, if this guy hits the portal, we'll go kick the tires. But I'm struggling to find a lot of players who fit that description right now. It's also just crazy to see this happen. And I will say, I am not as locked in, obviously, to this firing situation as I was the Gary Patterson one. But I was doing a podcast when Gary got let go. And the national media, there were so many people that were like, this is silly. And how could TCU do this? And, he built the program and all these things. And I understand he got in the Hall of Fame. He deserved it. He is the architect of TCU football. He's the one that built the program. I also think it was time for those two sides to part ways, right? I believe both those things can be true. But in this Gundy situation, I feel like people are realizing this is just now the way of the world in college sports. Like, yes, Mike Gundy built a heck of a program. I saw a stat. He only had 2 seasons that he completed where he had a losing record. And he started coaching Oklahoma State in 2005. That's 20 years. 2 decades of success with the exception of 2 seasons. But he didn't evolve with the game, right? He wasn't super interested in the transfer portal. He didn't really like NIL. He was on record saying before they got throttled by Oregon that they built their team using the, budget shopping method, and that Oregon has all these amazing stars. So he didn't evolve with the times, and because of that, Oklahoma State decided it was time for him to go. But it is wild to see, like, a lot of those same people who were like, how could TCU do this? They didn't have those same opinions about the Mike Gundy situation. Sometimes you just have to say, you know what, this isn't working. We're going to part ways. Just something to keep an eye on, though. These guys have 30 days into the portal. They would not be helpful like this season, but moving forward, where would TCU go? But I don't think they would pursue Hos Haney or be interested in trying to get in touch with him if he did end up in the transfer portal. Kavorian Barnes did not practice on Tuesday. Zach Chapman did. This was underreported, but Zach Chapman, the defensive lineman, was not available in that SMU game. He did practice, though, so he should be ready to go. Barnes not practicing is bad news. We will get an injury report on Tuesday night. I'll try to update here in the YouTube comments what it was or what it is. Avery Helm also did not practice. He's dealing with a hamstring injury. He missed the season opener, played a little bit against ACU, and then did not play against SMU. You need Barnes back. It's a short week. It's going to be a quick turnaround, all those things. But you need Kavorian Barnes in the lineup. Like, you were able to make it happen and get it done without him against SMU. I thought they ran the ball serviceably. You need him to really take the next step, though, and have a higher ceiling with your football team. TCU, Arizona State, Friday night. I'll have more coverage on Friday. We'll have a post-game show after the ball game Friday night. It's Frog Factor Podcast. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel.